Come blast off in my time machine. Third eye feeling like an Visine. Blast off, blast off, blast off, blast off. Come blast off in my time machine. Third eye feeling like an Visine. Blast off, blast off, blast off, blast off. Lights and unexplained phenomena roam our skies, above our heads, and yet right under our noses, some say. These possibly aerial threats, as they're called, are after something. What that something is can be hard to pinpoint. Cattle mutilations, crop circles, abductions, they're all evidence that something is taking place. On today's episode, we will speak with, well, an amazing first-hand experiencer, gaining knowledge of how his sighting and experience took place. This is Ryan, the original outlaw of the airwaves, bringing you another episode of Hero Paranormal Podcast. If you want to support Hero, go to heroparanormal.com. And you can hit that donate button if you want, or you can keep up with podcasts, same button, and go to archives. Also, like and subscribe at heroparanormal.com on YouTube. So, sometimes every great once in a while, a case like this one we are going to discuss comes around. It's a case so amazing and intriguing that society grabs a hold of it and won't let go. When honesty and facts add up and lend credence to an experience so mind-boggling that the only real human reaction is to analyze it and learn more, well, we have that. In this case, the Pascagoula abduction case and sighting occurred in 1973 when co-workers Charles Hickson and Calvin Parker were abducted by aliens while fishing near Pascagoula, Mississippi. It was a different kind of case. The incident immediately got media attention and has been among the top 3 to 5 UFO cases, depending on who you talk to, ever reported. We are blessed enough to have Calvin Parker talking with us this episode and outlining how everything went down. Nearly, 45, 46 years ago, almost. And shedding light on possibly the most mysterious and intriguing form of alien contact this century has possibly ever documented. So without further ado, the man with the plan, fishing rod in hand, Mr. Calvin Parker. Welcome to the Hero Paranormal Podcast. Society grabs hold of a case like yours, and it's one that is... It brings in the human factor, in my opinion, and the facts add up. And I just wanted a lot of people know about the Pascagoula case, and it was immediately, drew attention. You didn't want it to draw attention, and that, I think, brings more credence to your case. But can you kind of go through the events that evening and maybe even the evening before, or the things that led up to it and how it all went down? I know that some listeners don't know all the details, but how that evening started out anyway. Calvin, could you go into detail on how that went?
Yes, sir, I can. Matter of fact, I go back the day before. I was working in the oil field 16 hours a day, going to get married in the following November. So, let's see, I got an Elko. Anyhow, I was going to get married November the 9th. This was in October. So I called a friend up and asked for a job. And this was in 1973 at the F.B. Walker and Son shipyard. He said, well, come on down, take your physical, go to work. My very first day on the job was October 11th of 73. We worked all day. When we got ready to get off, he decided he wanted to go fishing and asked me if I wanted to go. I said, sure, you know, that I love to fish, and we just go. So we left work, and we went by his house and picked up the fishing equipment. And we went to an old place called the Shaw Peter Shipyard, and it was an abandoned shipyard. So, but it was no trespassing signs there, and that's the first thing I asked him. I said, you know, Charlie, there's no trespassing signs here, and I don't think we ought to be fishing here. He said, no, son, it's okay. We can fish here. I fished here many a times before. So we went ahead and was walking in. The first thing I noticed was all the debris laying around in the shipyard. And he explained, well, the tide comes in and the water gets up and it brings this stuff in. Then when it leaves and goes out, it just leaves it deposited on the bank. So I took it, and I was satisfied then. So we went to the pier. We drug an old log up, sitting there on the pier. Well, being my first day working in the shipyard, I was looking across the river, the Pascagoula River, and I noticed there was a big Coast Guard cutter, or maybe a Noah ship. It was one or the other that was sitting out there. And I was thinking to myself, now how does steel float? You know, something made out of steel float, because it's heavy and we've been beating on it all day long with a hammer. And that's what was going through my mind. When I noticed from behind me there was some hazy blue lights reflecting out across the water. And that was the same color as the police cars down here, the blue lights. So I thought maybe they was coming to run us off and put us in jail for trespassing, because I didn't know if he was telling me the truth or not about the trespassing part. And I wish it had been the law coming to pick us up. So immediately we both stood up and turned around to see what was going on. And these hazy blue lights turned into a big bright spotlight. One of the brightest lights I've ever seen in my life. And this thing just shined on us, just kind of enclosed around us. Well, immediately we was kind of, you know, you get a light shined in your eyes, you're going to squinch them a little bit and have a little problem seeing until your eyes get adjusted. So we was going through the eye adjustment thing, or I was. I don't know about Charlie. And I noticed there was 3 creatures coming toward us. And I couldn't really make out their face or anything then until they got a little closer. And 2 of them got a hold of Charlie, and one of them got a hold of myself, and immediately I felt an injection into my arm. And what that was, it had to be some kind of tranquilizers, what they figured out at the emergency room or something, because it just knocked the fear out. But it also paralyzed me. I couldn't move nothing. Now I could turn my head and move it. I could roll my eyes. I could still see. I could hear. And I could smell, you know, the smells around. But I just couldn't move this time. He picked us up, and he picked me up and carried me to the door of this craft that was sitting there, floated me toward this door, and they put us down, or paused there for a minute, and I remember looking in to see where the lights was coming from, because we're still swallowed in that big spotlight, and it looked like it was coming out of the paint. It was just illuminating out of the paint. And then he kind of got me and made a left turn. We went down a hall a little way, and then on the right-hand side there was a door, and he turned us, and he still had me by the arm, and I noticed the only thing in this room that I could see was like a glass-looking table. And he carried me over to this table and laid me on a table, and I was laid at a little bit of an angle on this table. So, but I was laid on my back so I could look up. And this thing that carried me in, and I'm calling him the big ugly one, just kind of backed up in a corner and shut down. So that made me think this was some kind of robotic creature. He was gray, had skin kind of like an elephant or a manatee, and looked like he had mittens on his hands. But when he backed in that corner, it just shut down just like a machine would shut down, like he turned the switch off on him. And while I was laying on this table, I was looking up, and I noticed something about the size of a deck of cards came out of the ceiling. And it stopped about a foot, maybe a foot and a half, 2 foot from my face. And it started revolving around my head. And every time it revolved, it would click. So then it got up in front of my head, and it paused and shot right back up into the ceiling and just disappeared. Well, I sensed a presence. I didn't see nothing right then, but I just sensed that there was somebody else in the room, and I turned my head kind of to the right and started looking, and there was this, I'm calling it a female-looking creature. Now, I don't know if it was female or male or what it was, but I just sensed that this was a female creature that was coming in, and she looked kind of human. She had eyes, nose, ears, mouth, a little bit of hair, and, but I couldn't see any breasts or anything to distinguish any kind of sex on her until later on, I recognized the voice a little bit. But she came over, and her hands, she took her hands and kind of grabbed me by the cheek there. And I didn't feel any kind of sensation in her hands, but I did notice, I rolled my head over, and I noticed that her 2 middle fingers was a little longer than normal. And she took her other hand and she pushed down on my cheek, and then she took the other fingers and she run them down my throat, straight down behind this little deal that hangs down, and tried to come up into my nasal cavities, I guess. Mm-hmm. I don't know what all was back there, but all I know was out of my mouth, out of my nose, and when she seen I was in duress, and I was, she pulled her hand down, and telepathically, and this was in a female's voice, in English, just like we speak down here in the South, kind of a Southern slang a little bit. Mm-hmm. Now, I think they can kind of disguise their voice where they not as scary to you. And she said, "We're not going to harm you." And, I was thinking to myself, well, it's just a little bit late for that. But she did this in a way that I felt comfortable with her, because, anytime you're choking and bleeding, you want to hear, they're not going to kill you either they are or not. And she backed up out of the way a little bit, and she made a mumbling noise from her throat. And I've described this noise. In the South, we have alligators down here. And during the spring, they do a mating call, and it's low grown, and you can hear it all the way across it'll get carried for miles. And that's what this kind of sounded like to me. And when they did, this old big ugly one that was standing in the corner, he came alive and jumped up like a jack-in-the-box and come over and grabbed me back by the arm again, and I felt another injection. Well, automatically, that kind of took the edge off. She backed on up out of the way, and he proceeded to carry me out, and he took me back to the river and set me down in almost the same spot, except I was standing facing the river that it picked me up in. Well, by that time, Charlie was on the ground, and he got up, and he said, son, you okay? Well, I kind of came to my senses a little bit, and I turned around, and Charlie was standing up by then, so I turned around and looked, and this thing just picked up off the ground real slow for a little ways, just made a little whisking noise. Then it shot up into the air like a streak of lightning. It just more or less disappeared. Well, by then we knew the danger was over, so we decided to sit down and talk about it for a minute. So we both agreed right there, we're not going to tell anybody about this, because back in the 70s, people would think you're crazy. And keep in mind, there was no cell phones back in, or you had to be rich to have one, and I was far from that. And no social media. So we figured the best thing to do, us being from the South, and take a lot of ridicule like we did, and me fixing to get married in November, we just wasn't going to say nothing. But we sat down and talked about that for a second. We left and went back to get in the car. When I got to the car, I noticed the windows on the passenger side was all shattered in place, and the car was really hard to crank. And that was a brand new car back in. But we finally got it cranked. Now, it didn't run right because what had happened, the graphite in the plug wires, what a mechanic told me, had separated. And it was from a magnetic field or electrical field or something that was in there. But anyhow, the car got cranked. We got in it and left, and we was going back home. And on the way home, he seen a store. And they have blue laws here, so the store wasn't open, but it was a payphone hanging on the outside. He said, I need to make a phone call. Well, I thought he was just going to call his wife and talk to her for a minute. But he got out. We hunted some change under the seat of the car. We got a dime raked up. He dropped it in the phone. Well, I didn't listen to his side of the conversation right then. But he come back to the car, and he said, they said they didn't handle nothing like this no more. Call authorities. And I said, who is they? He said, Keesler Air Force Base. I said, Charlie, we agreed not to talk about this to nobody or tell nobody. They had just shut down Project Blue Book, so this happened just after that. So he said, I need to make another call. He reached and got another dime, went back out to the phone, and he called. But this time he called the local sheriff department, which that would be the Jackson County Sheriff Department. They said, well, stand by there for just a few minutes. They sent 2 officers out. They looked inside the car. I was driving, so they was not really concerned about Charlie. They just kind of glanced in the car and asked me if I'd been drinking. I said no, so they got me out, give us a little field sobriety test, and they said, well, follow us to the sheriff department. So we followed them back to the Jackson County Sheriff Department, and they split us up and put us both in different rooms. They took Charlie to a room and took me to a room, and they asked me, well, what's going on? I said, look, fella, I don't even know what's going on myself. What did he say? And he said, well, I need to know what's going on. You tell me what's happening here. I said, as far as I know, nothing is. We went fishing. Well, Charlie was back there spilling his guts to these other deputies. Then they took us and put us in the same room together. And this is where what they call the secret tape came out. They had a tape recorder hid in a room where we didn't know it was in there. And they put us in there to say what we talked about it. We was going to laugh about it or carry on about it. Well, we did talk between ourselves about what was going on a little bit. And they could see the fear or hear the fear in our voices and all. Well, they let us sit in there for a few minutes. Then they came in the door, and I just shut up. Charlie did too. And then got the tape recorder, the sheriff did, and he walked outside, and they listened to it. And he come back, And he said, you know, I know something's going on with y'all. I want to talk to y'all a little more about this in the morning. Once y'all go home and get some rest. I said, well, look, if you know what's going on, we need to see a doctor, because I don't want to. I watched these Apollo missions, and I seen them come back down, and they quarantined their astronauts for 7 days. Not even their wives could see them. So I was starting to get concerned about some kind of infection that would hurt somebody else. I wasn't concerned about myself that much, but I was concerned about giving it to somebody else, and I was concerned about radiation because my father worked for the Atomic Energy Commission, and I knew all about radiation, and I didn't know these things might put it off or not. He said, well, we'll talk about all of this later. And we went on home. I got to the house, and I went in my room, and I went in to take a shower, and I pulled all my clothes off, and I put in a paper bag. They wasn't plastic bags back in. So I put all my clothes, including my shoes. I took a gallon of bleach, and I got in the shower, and I poured this over my head and rubbed it all over my body the best I could stand it, and rinsed it off. Got out, put on some clean clothes, picked this bag up, and carried it to the dumpster. In the dumpster. Well, we went to bed that night, got up the next morning, and I walked in there, and Charlie was already up. Of course, I didn't sleep any, and I said, you ready to go to work? And he said, yeah. We left going to work. Now, I didn't know how many cars were supposed to be there because this is just my second day at work. But there was all kind of cars at the shipyard. It was these uplink vans for the TV news and all, had their big, tall, reaching up these satellites and things. And I still didn't put two and two together what was going on. I thought it was just something the shipyard was doing. So we brassed in and went to our workstation. And we wasn't there just a few minutes, and they called our name on the PA speaker, and they sent somebody down to get us, told us to come to the office. So when we got to the office, the owner of the company said, we're going to have to do something. Y'all going to have to give a press release or do something. We cannot conduct any kind of business in this office today because we can't even get a phone line in because the phone's just ringing. We got people we don't even know coming into the office and to the yard. Y'all can't even go out on the yard and work because people's going to be asking you questions. Well, I knew then that somebody had spilled the beans. Now, I didn't know if it was Charlie or the sheriff department or who it was. Well, it had to be Charlie to start with, and the sheriff department did tell because I know I didn't tell them anything. So the people we work for sent their company attorney over. They sat down with Charlie, and he worked up a press release. They gave him a press release. Well, by that time, the sheriff department had already showed up back there, that some of the deputies and the sheriff that had investigated this. And he said, look, you're right. I need to take y'all up to the emergency room and get you checked. So they loaded us up in a patrol car, and they left, and they went to the Jackson County or the Singing River Hospital to the emergency room, and they did a thorough examination, blood work and all this. And the doctor come out, he said, everything looks okay. Then the sheriff said, the deputy that picked us up said, I've got orders to take y'all to Keesler and get you checked for radiation. Now, Keesler was an Air Force base, which probably was 30 miles from where we were. Mm-hmm. So he got in there. We went straight to Keesler. They had an EMP meet us at the gate, and we just followed him on back to the back. Well, when we went to get out, he told everybody else sat in the car. We pulled up, and I seen about 6 guys in hazmat suits. They got us out of the car. They took us up and checked us with whatever they checked us with for radiation. One of them said, all clear. Well, when they said that, they pulled their hazmat suits off, and they said, look, they want to see y'all in the meeting room. It's all the way down this hall right here to very back. So we walked down that hall. I was afraid not to comply with them then because it looked like we'd done got, something going on. We walked down that hall, and they had several uniformed officers in there from the service, from the Air Force. And then they had every police department on there's 3 counties on the Gulf Coast. All the sheriffs was down here. All the mayors from the police department was down here. Well, they took us back and they interrogated us. Or I wouldn't say interrogated us. They asked us what went on. And they was extremely nice about everything. And I just told them I didn't know because I did not want nothing to do with this. And so I just told them I really didn't know, didn't remember, passed out or something. I told them something that was, something besides the truth because I didn't feel like the truth needed to be told right then. They said, well, y'all can go. So we went back out and got in a patrol car, and we left there, and the deputy took us back to the shipyard where we was working, and he said, y'all don't leave right yet. There's somebody in there that wants to see you. And I thought, oh, gosh, this is going to go on. So we went in, and, of course, Dr. John Allen Hynek, which was over Project Blue Book, but not in official capacity, was there, and Dr. John Allen Hynek, Dr. Harder, that was over Alpo, which he was a doctor then, was there to talk to us. Now, how they got there that fast, this was the next morning, I have no idea, but they did. So Dr. Hynek took me first and talked to me, while Dr. Harder took Charlie back and talked to him, give him a physical and all that. Then they just kind of swapped up, and I went back with Dr. Harder, and Charlie went in there with Dr. Hynek. Well, when they got through, Dr. Hynek says, I need to go to the site. Can y'all come back over here in the morning? I was thinking, sure, I'll do that. So then I kind of opened up and talked to Dr. Hynek a little bit about what went on. Because, he was just that reassuring of a person that I kind of felt comfortable around him. So we left, we went home, we got up the next morning, went back in. Well, I remember Dr. Hynek being upset because they didn't ribbon off what I would call the crime scene, because that's what it was. Because we was abducted against our will. And it's kind of like I told somebody, my first day at work, the very first day on the job, I got a physical, I got fired, and I got abducted. And that's kind of what happened. Well, they got through, and the shipyard, the guy that owned the shipyard said, well, y'all need to take a few days off because, y'all not going to be able to work here because the people won't leave you alone. Mm-hmm. And I understand that. They didn't want any disruptions. So I got in a car and I went back to Laurel, Mississippi, because I hadn't talked to my family yet, hadn't talked to none of my friends, hadn't talked to my fiancée, the girl I was engaged to. But I went back to Laurel, and the thing about it, they knew about what had happened. They was just glad to see me. And nobody asked me what happened. So up until I did the book last year, I never talked about it to anyone. I kept my mouth shut. The news media would come and start asking questions. And if you told them something, if you gave some kind of little press release or something, they'd just make it bigger than what it was or change it to what it was. So I was discouraged with the news media. And kind of like Donald Trump says, fake news, that's what they was doing with me. So I chose not to tell my family. I chose not to tell my friends. And what I did, I got in a car and left, and I told the girl I was engaged to, November the 9th, we were supposed to get married, that I'd be back then, and we'd get married, and by then I'd have a job somewhere and a place to live, and we'd go there. And that's what I did. Less than a month later, came back, we got married, we got in the car, I went back to work in the oil field, and we just followed that around. Then I finally bought a little construction company, and I moved back to the Mississippi Gulf Coast because there was plenty of work here. But out in public, I never would call my name out. I never would let nobody know who I was. So, I kept it quiet. I didn't even tell my wife. Married to her 45 years, I kept it secret from her. Now, she knew I had been abducted or went through something, but I never sat down and told her the story. Well, one day, we had a neighbor pass away, and like I say, my neighbors didn't know who I was, because I wouldn't go by my real name around here. And we had a neighbor pass away, and we went to the wake. And this was just 2017. Yeah, 2017. And we went to the wake, and I messed up, and I signed my real name on the register, where you, as a guest, coming out, whatever you do. Mm-hmm. And everybody recognized my name. Now, this is 45 years later. And they come up and started asking questions. And that's like I told them, this is not the place to talk about this. This man's wife's in there, his daughter's in there, and they grieve it. And we need to respect their feelings and not put the attention out here on me or myself. So me and my wife went out, we got in the truck and left. On the way home, she said, look, you need to write a book. People want to know about you. This has been 45 years. You never talked about it. No more than you had to, You just blow them off. And people really want to know. They really care what happened. Maybe you need to write a book. I said, no, why then? I don't have the education to write a book. And I didn't. I didn't have much of an education. And I said, there's no way that I could sit down and write a book because I just don't know how. Well, we kind of let it die, and I figured she would forget about this in a day or two. It was just a passing thing. Well, just so happened, the very next day, it was just like everything fell right into place. I got a call from Philip Mantle, a publisher in the UK, and he said, wanting to talk about me. Charlie had written a book. And everybody keep in mind, Charlie has kept this thing alive for years. He was going to lectures and conferences and talking about it, writing a book. And but I didn't. I wanted to stay out of the spotlight. So Philip Mantle called the next day. He managed to find me through a friend and wanted to ask me some questions about Charlie's book. I said, well, Philip, you're asking the wrong one because I've never read the book, not going to read it, don't even have a copy of it, don't want a copy of it. Well, since then, he sent me one, but I still haven't read it. And because I thought Charlie was the one that wrote this story and all, he said, look, Calvin, why don't you write a book? I said, I don't have the education to write one. I don't want to deal with this bull right now. I said, I know what happened, and that's enough. Well, still, at this time, I had never talked to my wife or my family or my friends about it. He said, well, think about it for about a week, and I'll call you back. Well, when I hung the phone up, and like I say, he's from the UK, so I just put on his phone number on my caller ID, no answer. And I was down loading my boat up on the trailer one day, and the phone kept rung, and it kept ringing. And I thought something might be wrong at home, but I was holding the rope with one hand, and I picked my phone up with the other, and just answered without looking at the caller ID. And it was Philip Mantle. And I didn't want to be rude and hang up on him, so I listened to him. Well, have you thought about writing a book? He said, think about this. let me explain it to you when you need to. You told me that the press changes your stories all the time, that it's nothing like you tell them most of the time. So, well, you're right. He said, this book is your legacy. You put it black and white in a book. Let them get their story from there. They can't change it. That's the way that it is. Well, he started making a little sense to me then. And we sat there and talked. I said, well, Philip, you know, here's the deal. I don't have an education to write a book. He says, well, I'll help you. I'll get you on the right track. You know, I'll tell you what to write about in the first chapter and the second chapter. He said the first chapter, just tell about yourself, who you are. Then the second one, tell how you met Charlie and how long you known him. And the third, tell your abduction. Then so-and-so. So I said, well, I'll do this under one condition. I said, I'm not a writer. I never did like English or literature or anything like that. If you don't change any word in that book, if you don't change nothing, I don't even want you to correct a misspelled word. Put a punctuation mark in where there's not one. He said, I agree. I won't do it. Well, what you write is what you're going to get. Well, the man stood by his word. I went ahead and was doing the book. And I come in, I told my wife, I said, look, you been wanting me to do a book. I hadn't talked to you about what's happening. Philip wants me to do a book. I don't want to do this book, but because a little piece around the house, I am. I said, I'm going to my office in the back. I said, I'm closing my door. Once a day, bring me something to eat and keep me something to drink back there, water, tea, or something. And I did not want to answer the phone or talk on the phone. So I come back and got on my little computer and done some hand notes and started on the book. About 2 weeks' time, I was finished with it. Well, the first time I sent it in to Philip, he sent it back. He said, you know, I told you I wouldn't change or edit nothing. He said, this is quite a mess. And it was. I didn't even try to do it. He said, let me just highlight a few things that you need to do. And I said, no, the way it is the way it is. This is the way we're running it. You got the book you wanted. One else got the book she wanted. I'm not changing nothing in it. And I didn't. We put it, we was planning on putting it on the market in September of 2018. But instead, he said that, sent it in for publishing it. He had it published, but he sent it in for printing to Amazon in July. And they accidentally released the book for a few days in July. Book sales went wild. I would have never believed it. Actually, I figured I wouldn't sell but 10 books, or we wouldn't. And it would be to my family. I'd have to buy them and hand them out to my family, and I wouldn't have to sit there and tell them the story. But when it got temporarily released in July, and as many copies as sold, it was in 4 days. It was on the bestsellers list. Philip called me. He said, I was going to take the book off the market, but I'm just going to have to slow down myself, and we're going to have to get everything straight here because it's just selling too good to let it go. And it was. And the more, this first book, which is Pascagoula, The Closest Encounter of My Story, Calvin Parker, the more we got into the book, the more witnesses that we started having coming forward, the more people that bought it. I went to my first book signing October the 11th, 2018. And, you know, we did the book. It come out in July, September, October. And I went to a book signing. There was people, they had to shut the streets down in Pascagoula to keep people out of the streets. They was curved all the way around the block. I ain't never seen so much interest in anything in my life. Of course, had been living here, people knew that I was here, but they didn't know where. And the people that did know me didn't know my real name here. And when I came out, I don't know how many books we signed and still to get through that day. It went on way up into the night, and I finally just got tired until the next, and we had to extend it over. And, it's been a roller coaster ever since. Since then, we've had eyewitnesses come forward. We've had law enforcement come forward that seen it that night. And we had talked to the dispatcher that was on duty that night. That very night that this happened to us. Now, this is right before he knew about our case. He had 50 calls of people reporting some identified flying object out there. He said he got so tired of writing narratives that night he couldn't hardly stand it. And that's kind of what led to the second book. The next book is like Pascagoula, the story continues, new evidence and new witnesses. So Philip's like a bloodhound dog. He got onto the case here, and he's dug up evidence that I didn't know people had. Mm-hmm. There's been witnesses come forward on their own, credible witnesses, and like military, law enforcement, preachers, or just your average person that live here. The first one that came forward was just by mistake. But when she came out of the woodwork, everybody did. And what happened, Fox News come down and did an interview with this lady's daughter, seen the interview on Fox News, and her daughter just made a comment. Well, my mother seen this that night it happened, and she's always wanted to meet Mr. Parker. You know how people are comment under something. Well, Philip happened to see the comment, and he got a hold of this girl's daughter and contact information for her. It wasn't like this lady approached us. And she finally gave some contact information. And Philip and Irene Scott got a hold of her and wanted to do an in-depth interview with her, and then I would go meet her after this. And that's got it all started there. And when she come out, and this wasn't something she wanted to do either. Her husband told her, people's going to think you're crazy. You don't want to do this. But she was right across the river, seen this thing land over there. She actually seen the craft, actually seen the beams, and as her husband went to work, and she was walking back from the boat, she actually seen one in the water, and he did too. And the Coast Guard that night, they called a Coast Guard cutter out. Now, it wasn't that night, but it was 2 or 3 nights later. A Coast Guard cutter went out, and they took a rod, a mooring rod, and there was something underwater, and they bumped this thing with a rod, and it just shot out like a streak of lightning. And they said, and it's all in the book, where they had done reports on it. So, it's credible witnesses that come forward, and a lot of them. But back in the 70s, people wouldn't come forward with something like this. Not people from Mississippi, because usually if you lived in Mississippi and worked around here, you had a bad name anyhow around the rest of the world. So people didn't want to be ridiculed around here. And that's one reason I kept my mouth shut. One reason I didn't want to say nothing, because I was engaged to get married. Her daddy was pretty strict. Everything's different now. You got your social media and you can find out more. I didn't know back then what an alien was or a UFO or nothing. Actually, I thought it was somebody. We got a Ingalls shipyard and they build ships for the military. I thought they might be working on some kind of experimental project. A couple of rednecks got out drinking beer in it and wanted to have some fun and, went around and did this. I had considered that. But since then, I found out there was nothing like that in the workings. But that kind of catches us up a little bit till today, except, for the other books. Since then, I've taken lie detector tests, voice stress tests, been hypnotized 3 different times. And what the hypnosis does, a lot of people don't believe it. And I really didn't myself. But it sharpens your memory of what you've seen and what you might not have seen that night. You know, it clarifies things. So, that's where we are today.
Yeah, it's amazing how a lot of people saw the ship leaving, as you mentioned. And back in 1973, I believe you said that it was kind of a fullish moon. Is that correct? And did you get a good look at the ship?
Yes, sir. Well, the lights were so bright it was hard, and it was a good full moon. It was a harvest moon that night. But the ship, I'm guessing, now it's hard to tell with all that lights was going on. I'm guessing it was 80, 100 foot long, maybe, and probably 10 or 12 foot high. Now, on the inside, the only place I seen was this hall in this examination room, but I didn't see any instruments. The only living being I think I seen was the one that run her finger down my throat. And then I seen this robotic-looking machine, the big ugly one, sitting over in the corner. But, and the smell, somebody asked me, could you smell any smells? Well, it's like I explained to them. We got a pogie plant here, and they go out and they bring in these pogies and they leave them on these boats 7 or 8 days without icing them back. They make cat food out of it. They grind them up. And it's a bad smell over in that direction anyhow. And you can't smell anything else once you get that odor in your nose. And so, it could have been some, I don't know.
And you had, after this is interesting, you had, if I'm not mistaken, were interviewed by Hynek. And what did you think of him? I mean, obviously you had a lot going on in a short period of time there. And it must have been just overwhelming, like all of it.
Of course, I didn't know who Hynek was at the time. I just later on found out, he was over Project Blue Book. And since then, I went to this UFO Congress to a convention they had, and I got to meet his son, Paul Hynek. But I had talked to Paul on the phone one time because Mr. Hynek gave me his phone number. And I called there. Paul was just a little old bitty thing just barely enough big enough to answer the phone and take a message where it's dead. And I asked Paul, I said, did you ever get the death stare from your daddy? He said, why are you asking that? He said, not really. He said, why are you asking? I said, because he sat in his chair and he put his chin on his hand and he just stared at me like he was looking all the way through me. But he was taking mental notes himself because they say the man was brilliant. And, he was a nice enough guy, but he wouldn't crack a smile. He wouldn't flinch an eye. I mean, you couldn't read him at all. But when he left, it's like he said, and there's also an interview with the sheriff the very next day. Now, when Hynek left, he said, there is no doubt in my mind that these guys genuinely went through something. And then the sheriff the next day, and they got the radio interview posted up on a little website that I got, Andrew Hoffman made up. And the sheriff sat there on the radio and said, there's no doubt we was real reluctant when these guys come in, that you could see the fear on them. And, that made them credible. So we know that something happened.
And being only 18 years old or so, you were really in the limelight. You were kind of found out by the media. You lived way back in an area that you said it was pretty hard and amazing that they found you. And this is amazing that apparently there was chatter of this throughout Mississippi, correct?
Oh, yes, sir. And, you can't hide from the press. I figured that out a long time ago. I would get lost sometime going to where I lived. And it was just a little gravel country road back in there with no signs or nothing. And it would be kind of scary if you didn't live back there to travel down that road. So, but they managed. They kept hunting me up. I got sick. I know one of them stuck a camera in my face one day, and I grabbed the camera. I told them to put it down. And that camera cost me $600 by the time the judge got through with me. I mean, it was just a mental thing for me going through all this. And I didn't want to talk about it. I didn't want to live through this thing. And, the older you get, the more you learn to deal with things. But when you're 18 years old, you're still really trying to catch on to life and learn life. I just turned 65 the other day, and I can deal with about anything that comes my way. But back then, I couldn't. My way of dealing with it was to stay away from it.
Right. And you met other people like Bud Hopkins, which is very impressive. And I guess the interesting thing to me is the, amount of time, the initial time, and I guess you would call it missing time. How much time do you think took place when you were actually on the yard and then in the ship or on the table?
I don't know. It's hard to say because that happened, it was October and the sun just went down, but the moon was full and it was bright. And it was about 11, 12 o'clock, I guess, when we got to the sheriff department. So, we spent a pretty good deal of time in there. And it seemed like it just flew by. But when you're scared and when you're in pain, I described to somebody one time, this is like you sitting on your couch watching TV. Somebody drives up in a van, kick your door down, grab you and take you out in that van, give you an examination, and you think you're going to die. That's a crime. It's like home invasion. And it's the same thing if you sitting on a riverbank to me and somebody snatch you off and you fishing, minding your own business. And, I just don't feel like it was right for them to do it, especially something as scary as what they were.
No, and the way that it's so mind-boggling the way that you describe them, kind of like they look, at least the drawings that I've seen of I guess you would call them the ugly ones, they look
right.
They're eerie looking.
They are. And now the female looking one, she wasn't really that bad. But I think that she had been practicing talking to make you feel comfortable. And she probably was practicing, I think she was really masked. I don't know under her mask what she would really look like. But they probably study you before they get down and know what's scary and what's not. But, the thing about it, I felt like a lab animal. I've talked about, how people used to experiment on animals, how we used to do. That's what I felt like. And that has actually brought me closer to animals because I felt like one then.
Yeah, it was.
So,
the disregard for just getting done whatever needs to get done. And
Right.
like you said, kicking in the door, I think that's a really amazing way to put it, and one that society can grab hold of, because you were just fishing. It wasn't like you were asking for any of this. And I wanted to ask you where people can get a hold of your book that's easiest, anything that you wanted them to check out, things of that nature, Calvin.
The only place that's selling it, except right here in Pascagoula, is Amazon. They can go to the book section under Amazon. Just Google my name up. And the first book is Pascagoula, The Closest Encounter of My Story, Calvin Parker. The book, it just came out last month. It's the new evidence. I can't even think of the name of it sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Pascagoula, the story continues. New evidence and new witnesses. And believe it or not, since then, Pascagoula has thought enough of me to put up a historical marker that'll be there for the rest of my life and for a long time. And they keep it up. And I went to the dedication of that, and they had a big thing with the city then. And the mayor come out, and the historical society came out, and they had a big thing at the historical marker. And, that was quite an honor, because I wasn't used to all this publicity. I just kind of stayed in the back. And now these books has really put me in a spotlight where I didn't want to be. But what it's done is brought me closer to my community, the place that I live. And I still live within 5 miles of where this happened. I go by it in my boat pretty regular. And I get involved in all the stuff that Pascagoula has going on and the coastal counties down here. I donate a lot of time and do a lot of charitable work and things like that. Just getting involved in the community, because for 46 years I was a recluse. I did not come out of hiding. I wouldn't talk to nobody too much but my family. And I didn't have that many friends. The friends that I had were good friends, true friends. And we all lived here on the Mississippi coast, and we all had boats. And every summer we'd all meet up and we'd fish together or go out on the sandbars and camp out and stay and swim together. Now that's friends that I had. Then in the winter we'd all go our separate ways, and we wouldn't see each other in the summer unless one of us needed each other for something. Then we would go and help this person. And, no questions asked, just whatever they needed. And that's the type of friends I had, just a handful of them. And it was true friendship. And my family still never really asked me about it. I've sat down and told them the story since the books came out. Of course, my wife has. She gets involved. She goes to these... last year I done several conferences and all, and she would go with me on them. They would pay my way and, give me a little speaking fee, and I would take that and buy her a plane ticket with it. I mean, it wasn't that much. And we got to spend a lot of time together. She got to travel with me, and it's actually brought us closer. But it's kind of like I'm telling everybody, and I was serious. I'm working on my houseboat now, and I've got a few things to wrap up in here. And what I do, I'm getting on my houseboat and I'm going off grid, and it'll be hard for anybody to get in contact. But I did tell the publisher, and we've got movie deals working and stuff, which, my living's made without all this bull, and it hadn't been no money in the books. What I get, I usually give back. But I did tell the publisher that I will hang around till we got all this finished up, and then I would go. but I hadn't made any more. I told everybody I wasn't going to any conferences this year, and I mean that. I'm not. I enjoyed the ones that I went to now. I've met some great people. And you would figure, I told my wife when we was going, I said, now, it might be a few weirdos in there and all, but shoot, the people that we met was good, quality, down-to-earth people. Curious, and that's the reason they was there. And the reason I was there, I'm still hunting facts. I still don't know what happened to me. And I'm just hunting answers. And that's the reason I'm staying with this as long as I had.
And we are blessed enough to have had you on here, Calvin, talking to us about this and outlining everything that went down 45 plus years ago and shedding light on, in my opinion, possibly the most mysterious and intriguing form of alien contact this century, or among the top 3. And it's a blessing to have had you on. Appreciate it so much for coming on and chatting with us, Calvin.
Well, I've enjoyed it. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Well, hope to talk to you soon, and have a wonderful holiday.
You too. Everybody have a good Merry Christmas. I know they don't say Merry Christmas anymore. Most people don't. They say Happy Holidays, but it'll always be Merry Christmas. And it's Christ's birthday to me, so, you can't go wrong celebrating the Lord Savior's birthday.
No, it's good. It's a good celebration, and I always put on a few extra pounds too. So, but
well, I lost 140 pounds last year, and I try to watch what I eat. But during the holidays, I catch myself wanting to eat something that I'm not supposed to. But I still go ahead and do it sometimes. Moderation, food in moderation. But I just don't want to get off the track. I was 340 pounds. I'm at 100 and around 170 pounds now. Matter of fact, my doctor told me last week if I didn't go back to eating, I'd starve to death. So maybe the holidays is a blessing for me.
That's a good thing. That's a good excuse to eat for the holidays.
Yes, it is.
I think it's a great one. Well, thanks so much, sir. Appreciate you coming on, and I hope to talk to you in the future soon.
We will. Anytime. You know how to get a hold of me. Thank you.
All right. Take care.
And I've enjoyed this.
What a great guy. Calvin Parker. Definitely read the books. They're amazing. The Pascagoula case is one that just continues to fascinate me the deeper I delve into researching it through books like those that he mentioned, and definitely check them out. They are amazing. And until next time, keep your eyes to the skies, feet on the ground, but don't forget to take a look around. Blast off in my time machine. Third eye feeling like an Visine. Blast off, blast off, blast off, blast off. Come blast off in my time machine. Third eye feeling like an Visine. Blast off, blast off, blast off.